All right, so get this. Today we're diving headfirst into the world of computer science, but with a twist.
A twist.
Yeah, we're tackling randomness.
Randomness.
You're right, trying to bring a bit of order to the chaos.
Ah, I see.
Ever stop to think about how computers, the masters of logic and precision, deal with the unpredictable?
Well, it's a bit like trying to teach a robot to improvise jazz. A fascinating paradox.
And to guide us through this maze, we have Scott Aaronson's PHYS 771 Lecture 7, Randomness.
It's a good one.
Don't worry, we've sifted through the technical jargon to bring you the good.
Exactly. Think of this as your crash course in randomness. Just enough to impress your friends. Or at least, sound like you know what you're talking about if it ever comes up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, first things first, how do we even define randomness in a world of ones and zeros? It's not exactly like computers can flip a coin, right?
Well, they can in a way, but you've hit on a key point. While philosophers might spend ages debating the true nature of randomness,
Yeah.
computer scientists are more about action. We need ways to define and use randomness in practical, finite terms. Think of it like this. We care about the probability of a coin flip, not about defining chance in the grand scheme of the universe.
So instead of chasing philosophical butterflies, we're building algorithms that can handle the uncertainty of the real world.
Exactly.
I can get behind that.
Yeah, it's about understanding and harnessing the power of probability to solve problems, especially when dealing with events that are just too complex or massive to analyze directly.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we actually wrangle this probabilistic beast, as I've affectionately dubbed it? What are the tools of the trade?
Well, just like any expert, computer scientists have their go-to tools.
Right.
When it comes to randomness, it's all about understanding a few key concepts. We start with probability, which helps us measure the likelihood of something happening, assigning a number between 0 and 1 to an event. Then there's expectation, which tells us the average outcome if we repeat a random event many times.
So if I were to hypothetically test my luck with the lottery, please don't try this at home, the expectation would tell me how much I'd likely win. Or, let's be honest, lose over time.
Precisely. Although I wouldn't recommend testing that particular theory. Now it gets even more interesting with tools like the union bound, linearity of expectation, Markov's inequality, and the famed Chernoff bound. Don't worry, they're not as intimidating as they sound.
These sound a bit like mathematical tongue twisters.
Ugh.
But I'm intrigued. Could you give us a quick rundown of how these tools come in handy?
Absolutely. Let's start with the union bound. It essentially tells us that the probability of at least one of two events happening can't be greater than the sum of their individual probabilities.
Okay.
Imagine you're trying to calculate the odds of, say, your computer crashing or you winning the lottery today.
Okay, so separately, those are both pretty low probabilities.
Exactly. The union bound helps us formally understand that, even taken together, the probability is still low. Definitely not a reason to avoid turning on your computer today. Now, Markov's inequality, that's where things get a bit more practical. Let's say you're a teacher averaging student heights.
Okay.
Markov's inequality gives you a way to quickly estimate the upper limit on how many students are, let's say, twice the average height, just based on the average itself.
So no need to painstakingly measure every single student. A
Exactly.
handy shortcut. It's interesting to see how these seemingly abstract mathematical tools have real-world applications.
Absolutely. And then we get to the rock star of the group, the Chernoff bound, which Aaronson describes in a rather entertaining way, involving casino managers and some implied threats.
Oh yeah, that caught my attention too. It sounds like something out of a movie.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with this Chernoff bound? Is it really as dramatic as it sounds?
Well, maybe not as dramatic as a casino heist, but in the world of probability, it's pretty significant. In essence, the Chernoff bound helps us figure out how likely it is that a random event will be wildly different from what we'd normally expect.
So if I flip a coin 100 times and get heads 90 times,
Yeah.
the Chernoff bound would tell me whether to suspect foul play.
Exactly. It's all about understanding when to raise an eyebrow at those seemingly impossible lucky streaks, whether it's in a casino or in the data we analyzed.
It's like having a statistical lie detector. Okay, so we've got our probability toolkit. But how does this all actually play out in the world of computer science? How are these tools used to wrangle randomness in algorithms?
Let me give you an example from Aaronson's lecture that I think you'll find fascinating. Imagine you have a program, essentially a set of instructions for calculations that starts with the number 1. Then it adds, subtracts, and multiplies this number according to the instructions. Our task is to figure out if the final output of this program is 0.
Sounds simple enough, right? Just run the program and see what we get.
You'd think so. But here's the catch. Sometimes these programs involve numbers so mind-bogglingly huge that even the most powerful computer wouldn't be able to calculate them directly. We're talking about numbers with more digits than there are atoms in the universe.
Okay, so brute force is out. We can't just throw computing power at the problem and hope for the best. What's the alternative?
This is where randomness and our trusty Chernoff bound come to the rescue. Imagine picking a random prime number, but not just any prime number. We're talking about a truly gargantuan prime, one with hundreds of digits more than your average prime.
Okay, I'm picturing a prime number with like 1 billion digits. It's pretty big.
Well, even bigger. Now, instead of running the program with regular arithmetic, we do all the calculations modulo this gigantic prime number.
A quick refresher for our listeners. Modular arithmetic is like using a clock to count. Once you go past 12, you circle back to 1.
An excellent analogy. So even if our program generates these insanely large numbers along the way, by using modular arithmetic with our chosen prime, the results stay smaller than that prime.
So we're essentially reining in the chaos by confining it within the boundaries of this enormous prime number.
Exactly. And here's the really cool part. If our program does output 0, when we do the calculations modulo this large prime, there is a very, very high probability that the actual output without the modulo trickery is also 0. The Chernoff bound helps us quantify that probability.
So we're using randomness in the form of this randomly chosen prime number to get a reliable answer to a problem that would otherwise be impossible to solve directly.
Precisely. Aaronson uses a clever analogy of a card game to illustrate this, comparing the process to picking a random 24-bit number and seeing if it matches the program's output. It's like finding a needle in a haystack by randomly scattering the hay and hoping the needle magically appears on top.
That's a fantastic analogy. I'm starting to get a feel for how powerful randomness can be for tackling these seemingly impossible computational problems.
It's like using a flashlight in a dark room. You can't see everything at once, but by shining the light in strategic places, you can eventually explore the entire space.
This is all incredibly clever. But I have to ask, how do you even find these massive prime numbers in the first place? They don't exactly grow on trees.
That's another fascinating rabbit hole in the world of computer science. But we'll save that for another deep dive. For now, just know that we have surprisingly efficient algorithms for determining whether a number is prime, even if it has millions of digits.
Okay, so we can find these massive primes, use them to tame the numerical chaos in our program, and get a reliable answer. This brings up an interesting thought. Not all random algorithms are created equal, right? There must be different levels of randomness, so to speak.
You are absolutely right. And this leads us into the world of complexity classes, which helps us categorize problems based on how tricky they are to solve using different types of randomized algorithms.
It's like sorting algorithms into different leagues based on their randomness superpowers.
That's a great way to put it. Aaronson walks us through a few key complexity classes.
Okay.
BPP, RP, co-RP, and ZPP.
These
might sound like alphabet soup.
Yeah, they do.
But they're just labels for different ways we can use randomness to solve problems, with varying degrees of accuracy and certainty.
So it's less about the randomness itself and more about how we define success for these algorithms.
Exactly. Let's start with BPP, which stands for Bounded Error Probabilistic Polynomial Time. Don't let the name scare you. It's essentially the club for algorithms that are allowed to be wrong occasionally, but only by a tiny bit. And here's the kicker. We can shrink that margin of error by running the algorithm multiple times and seeing which answer pops up most often.
So it's like getting a second, third, or even 100th opinion to be extra sure.
Precisely. Think about your email spam filter.
Okay, yeah.
It uses probabilistic algorithms to figure out if an email is legit or junk. By running multiple checks, it gets more and more confident in its prediction, hopefully saving you from a barrage of unwanted ads.
That's a great analogy. So BPP algorithms are like the friend who's usually right.
Yeah.
But double checks just to be safe. What about the other categories? Those sounded even more intriguing, like the super sleuths of the algorithm world.
Ah, yes. Let's talk about RP, or randomized polynomial time. These algorithms are sticklers for certainty when they give a no answer. They're never wrong when they say no. However, they're allowed a bit of leeway when they give a yes answer. There's a small chance they might be mistaken.
So it's like a detective who never wrongly convicts an innocent person, but might occasionally let a guilty one slip through the cracks.
Precisely.
Wow.
And its counterpart, core RP, flips that script. It demands absolute certainty for yes answers, but can be a bit more lenient with the no's.
So Core P is the detective who never misses a guilty person but might accidentally arrest an innocent one every now and then.
You got it. These distinctions might seem subtle, but they're crucial for understanding the strengths and weaknesses of different randomized algorithms.
Okay, this is making a lot more sense now. It's fascinating how we can categorize these algorithms based on their, tolerance for uncertainty.
Yeah.
But what about that last one? ZPP. That one said it almost too good to be true.
Ah, yes. ZPP, or zero-error probabilistic polynomial time, represents the ideal scenario. These algorithms are always right when they give you an answer. The catch is they're allowed to say, I don't know, sometimes.
So it's like the wise old sage who only speaks when they're absolutely sure the answer, otherwise they just smile enigmatically.
Exactly. In a way, ZPP algorithms represent the holy grail. Perfect accuracy when they commit to an answer.
This is all incredibly mind-bending. We've gone from trying to define randomness to categorizing algorithms based on their probabilistic quirks, and it all ties back to this fundamental idea that randomness, often seen as the opposite of what computers excel at, can be a powerful tool for solving complex problems.
Absolutely. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Aaronson's lecture goes even deeper, exploring concepts like nonuniformity and derandomization. But for now, I think we've given our listener plenty to ponder.
We have definitely given them a lot to think about. So, to our listener, if this whirlwind tour through the world of randomness and computer science has sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to explore further.
And remember, the next time you encounter a problem that seems impossibly complex, a touch of randomness might just be the key to unlocking its secrets.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing. And remember, sometimes a little chaos can lead to incredible discoveries.